adopted father, if he's taught me anything in life, not through his words, but through his actions, is research the hell out of everything you do. For the longest time, I have been an impulse buyer. Whenever I was younger and had just gotten my first job, I would just buy things because I could. Thankfully, I got those mistakes out early on, which allowed me to not make large money mistakes. My paychecks back then are not nearly as good as they are now, so although it definitely hurt at the time, I'm making slightly less of a financial mistake now than I would back then. That being said, whenever I make big purchases, usually things above like $100, I'll do a fair amount of research before I make that purchase. Wow, I cannot speak today. It's obviously because I'm nervous. So I thought that I would take you along the ride of how I decide to make a big purchase, and I'll use my current camera, the Canon T7i, which I bought with a kit lens, and I'll kind of walk you through the process of how I decided on this camera with this lens, and basically what I did. The first thing that I did, and the first thing that you should probably do, is to identify a need. I think that it's silly to pointlessly spend money on crap that you just don't need. If you already have a perfectly good set of wireless headphones, the only reason you should get another pair is if either these are broken or that pair provides a considerable value for the price to be able to improve your quality of life in some way. In this case, I didn't actually own a DSLR before this one. I was using instant film cameras, and there's obviously a big difference between these two mediums. The reason why I chose to get this camera was primarily for my YouTube channel, but also because I was falling in love with photography and I wanted to explore that more, and the best medium to explore that at a reasonable price point was the DSLR. So I identified a need. I wanted a digital camera with interchangeable lenses, and from there it made the research process a lot easier because I could have looked into camcorders, I could have looked into the pocket cameras. There's a lot of different options out there for digital cameras, but because I identified specifically what I needed and the tools that I would need, this became the obvious choice. The next and arguably most important point is the price point. What is your upper limit of what you're willing to spend? It's really important to identify this very early on because otherwise the price can kind of get away from you. It's really easy to spend several $1,000s on camera gear because it's all really expensive, and technically the more you spend, unless you're being stupid, the better quality your images can be. That being said, your photography journey is usually determined by how much limitations that you set upon yourself. If you are forced to use one camera and one lens, you are going to become more creative in your photography, and you're going to learn how to adapt to different situations, rather than getting the best full-frame camera that's cost $2,500 to $5,000 with a $1,000 to $3,000 lens on it that can do anything, and you barely just have to do anything but press a button. There's a big difference. I shoot with a prime lens, a 50mm lens for portrait photography, and it forces me to be very creative in how I do my framing. And it forces me to not be as flexible as I could be with the 24 to 70mm to 2.8 lens L from Canon that I desperately want but cannot afford at the moment. By forcing yourself into constraints, as far as pricing goes, it allows you to make the educated decision of what you're going to buy. For me, I decided that I wasn't willing to spend any more than $1,000 on photography, at least at the beginning. And the main reason why I decided that was because in the past, I had got into hobbies like playing the ukulele or exercise, and I just couldn't stay with it. So I figured, at very worst, I'd spend $1,000, have an expensive camera and lens that I could eventually resell, and it wouldn't be that big of a deal. So, having the idea of wanting a DSLR, and knowing my price point, I was able to greatly narrow down the options. The next step, it depends on kind of what you're willing to buy, whether or not how applicable this will be for you, and that's researching brands. If you're looking at headphones, you got Beats by Dre, you got Bose, you got Skullcandy. If you're looking at cameras, you got Canon, you got Nikon, you got Sony. You have to look at the major brands and decide where you want to fall in line. Now, it's possible that brands don't even matter to you, and you're just looking for the best bang for your buck, and that's totally fine. For me, and cameras especially, brands are a really big deal. Not because I want to show off what brand that I'm using, but because compatibility. See, because I got a Canon camera, I have to use Canon lenses. If I got a Sony camera, I could not use this Canon lens on there without an adapter, which can impact quality of image, it can impact the weight of the camera. There's a lot of different factors that go into it. The reason why I picked Canon over Sony and Nikon was because, in my opinion, Nikon's not a very solid brand. I don't really like their camera lineup. I don't like their price points. I don't like their color science. I don't like their video qualities. Nothing about Nikon really excited me. It didn't fit my use. Sony is arguably better than Canon when it comes to video. In fact, I would say that's almost inherently better than Canon because that's what they primarily focus on. So for YouTube, it would have been better, but I was looking for a fit that would be good for photography and videography because I love doing YouTube. I also love shooting portrait photography of my friends. I love doing landscape photography, taking pictures of my dogs, whatever it might be. I really enjoy taking photography. And I could do that with a Sony camera and it would still look fantastic, but I wanted something that could do both well instead of one doing it really good and one doing it kind of average. So I picked Canon as the brand. Has good color science, has great autofocus. Overall, it seemed like the right fit for exactly what I wanted. It won't be as great as Sony with video, but it does what I need it to do. From here, it's actually a pretty easy story. I determined I need a DSLR. I know I want to spend at least, not at least, but as much as $1,000. I know that I'm getting a Canon, so now all I have to really do is narrow down the options. I look for all the Canon cameras within my price range, and I just go from there. Now, I made it more complicated because I needed to also have a kit lens because I did have lenses by Canon at the time because I had an old SLR, a 35mm film camera, but those lenses were over 2 decades old. They weren't going to do what I needed them to do for this channel. I can promise you those lenses do not look good in video. In fact, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to show you this right now. There, are you happy? You get to see now what it looks like to have a 20-year-old lens in my setup, and you can see how it does not look good. Okay, let's go back. See, isn't that better? You get the point that I'm trying to make though, right? So $1,000, I had to pick a camera and at least one lens, which obviously this lens is gonna be better than this lens, but you get the point. So I was looking at different options, and this is very camera specific, so this might not apply to everybody, but when I was looking at cameras, it basically came down to 3 different options: the Canon T7, the Canon T7i, which is the camera I'm shooting on, and then the Canon SL2. And the reason why I eventually chose the Canon T7i, the camera I'm filming with, is because for video, it had more autofocus points. So the T7 had 9, this has 45. So if I'm doing video, it follows me a lot better. Doesn't make it as hard to stay in focus because I do a lot of pointing a camera at me, having nobody operating the camera, and having to have to stay in focus. So I don't have to worry about me being in focus in video. I want to just do the video. For photography, they were functionally the same for the most part. I mean, if you're shooting a manual on both of them, they're going to do basically the same thing. And the main reason why I didn't pick the SL2 at the time was also because limitations when it came to video and photo. It was technically a lower price and it functionally did the same thing. They all have the same megapixels. They can all do the same thing technically. But for video specifically, because I wanted a camera that could do both video and photo really well, this was the camera of choice. And with the kit lens, it came in at under $1,000, so I gave it a shot. Since then, I've spent too much money on photography, and I've realized that upgrading the lenses matters more than upgrading the body of the camera, so I've been trying to put off getting a new camera body, at least for the next year or two, because obviously I want to master this one first, but that's a side tangent. Kind of backing up a little bit, once you've narrowed it down, it's important to weigh the pros and cons of all the purchasing decisions in front of you. Obviously, there's no such thing as the perfect purchase if you're trying to do it on a budget. You could obviously spend infinite amounts of money and get the perfect gear for what you need, but whenever you're weighing pros and cons, determining what's most important to you, which going back to number 1, basically just making sure that you're not losing sight of what you wanted originally just because you found something at a better deal, because at the end of the day, you should make a purchase you're happy with than a purchase you'll regret later on, because reselling things, you're never going to recoup the full cost of that. And then last but not least, of course, is deciding. For me, this was obviously the decision that I had to make. Maybe you decided to choose Skull Candy because it's a brand you've used for 20 years. Maybe you choose Bose because you've heard really good things about it from your friend. Maybe you decided to choose Apple AirPods because it's just the easier choice. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was not what I expected to be making tonight. It's just something that kind of came up out of nowhere that I decided to give a shot. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and give it a like. I really enjoy making videos like this where I get to talk about things that I'm passionate about. I'm hoping you guys find some interest in it as well. If you want to see more videos from me, go ahead and subscribe. I am uploading every single day for the year of 2021. I will continue to bring content to you, and I'm hoping that you guys enjoyed it. Man, I just cannot speak today. Do not forget to keep it casual.